My guest for the show today is Rizwan Abbas, and he's archaeologist. And he's been here before, but today I invited him to talk about something very, very important, to find out, to let the people know who he is. He also has a display, a Fiji display at the museum that ran for over 6 months at the Surrey Museum. So I think the display is no longer there, but he is also got involved in writing a chapter in the book, which he's here to talk about. And for those of you that are watching Kamilla Singh show, welcome abroad. And if you know of a person that we should highlight on Kamilla Singh show, please let us know. And we'll be more than happy to be able to profile you in here. And this show is all about you. So welcome, sir.
Thank you, Kamilla. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So how are you? How has life been?
It's been great. It's been quite busy actually since the exhibit opened almost just over a year ago. It's been fairly busy. I mean, meeting lots of people, meeting yourself, and many members of the community. It's been a wonderful experience.
Right. So you have put your display away. Was it just for one time, or can you do that again?
Well, the exhibit was hugely successful.
Yes, yeah.
It was originally it was supposed to be at the Museum of Surrey for about 4 months, and they extended it for 4 more months. So it just ended last month.
Yes.
I do have all the artifacts and all the items. So I'm looking at a couple of other places to display the exhibit again. If there's anybody who's interested, of course, give me a call. We can do the display. But there's the South Asian Museum actually of Canada in Ontario that I'm looking at, and I have some relatives and some friends in Calgary that were really interested in wanting to do an exhibit there to have representation. So there's a couple of things in the works that I have going on right now, yeah.
And you are also working full time?
Yes. Yeah, I'm an archaeologist with the Semiahmoo First Nation.
Yes.
So I've been working with them for about a year now.
That's excellent. This is excellent. How is it? How is your experience working with the First Nations people? Because all the time you always work somewhere else, and not that many people of color try to work with them or are employed by them.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I worked in the corporate world for quite a long time. Most of my career has been working in the corporate world. So working with the First Nations, I get to work on the other side of the page for a change. Yeah. And to be honest with you, it's a very fulfilling job. To be able to be a caretaker of the heritage and history of First Nations people is something that's really dear to me. Being an archaeologist and studying my own history, I'm able to firsthand be able to study the heritage and history of the First Nations people side by side with them on their reservations, and it's nice to have the archaeology and the history and the culture be the most important thing, as opposed to business, as it was in the business world. So it's something that is very dear to me.
And I think I would not say as an outsider, I will call it an outsider not from the culture, that if we go into their culture and learn about their culture and their history, there are so many similarities with our own culture and who we are too,
Yes.
right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, one of the counselors at Semiahmoo First Nation, my boss, when she found out that I was of Fijian background, she was actually quite excited, because she has some friends, some native, some indigenous Fijian friends of hers, and they have a lot of similarities. The indigenous Fijians and the indigenous First Nations people here are very similar. Their canoe culture, they have been in this land for thousands of years, and they have a connection with the land, and that's something that they've connected with very well. But that's where the connections stop. After that, if you notice that the First Nations people here are still marginalized by the government, and they're still trying to fight for their own rights. That's something that we share as Indo-Fijians. We share with the First Nations people. It's something that we're still trying to fight for, our own rights and our own place of belonging, whether it be in Fiji or abroad. So that's something that we've come to kind of be. Well, it's a similarity that we share.
Mm-hmm. A lot of similarities,
Yeah.
yes. And I think they do Lobo and all that. Yeah, you are very right when you are they are connected with the Aboriginal Fijians, like native Fijians.
Yeah.
So they share the land and they do Lobos and things like that.
Yeah.
When our ambassador was here, he went and visited their land and he was welcomed there and served with Lobo and all that. Yeah, it was Fijians, not Indo-Fijian, our native Fijians and the First Nations.
Yeah.
So it was a real beautiful history, like, how they take upon themselves to be able to welcome our people on their land too.
Yeah, what we're trying to do right now with the Semiahmoo First Nation and with native Fijians in Fiji actually is try to do a canoe exchange. So we're trying to trade canoes just as a kind of cultural exchange at the moment. So that's something that the ball is rolling right now. And so
And it
hopefully
will
we'll have
take
some
time.
yeah.
I think the election is coming there. They're more focused on the elections in Fiji. So talk a little bit about this chapter that you
Yeah.
have been asked to write, and the book is now published now.
Yeah.
So talk about the whole book first.
Sure. Right from the beginning, actually, when the exhibit was accepted at the Museum of Surrey, the committee that chose my exhibit actually called me up afterwards. One of the members of the committee called me up afterwards and asked me to contribute a chapter for this upcoming social history book on South Asians in British Columbia, and the chapter about our culture and heritage, Indo-Fijian culture and heritage. And to be honest, it was a very humbling request. I'm very humbled to have the opportunity to do this and write this, and to have this chapter published. And the book itself actually is about the history of South Asians, not just from India, but from the rest of the diaspora as well, and how they came to British Columbia and how they made British Columbia home. Some of the stories are personal stories. Some of the chapters are historic recollections of some of the historic events that have happened. So there's a mix of everything in this book. It's not, and there's also poems in this book. There's stories. There's academic writing. There's songs. There's very many things. It's a great tabletop book for people to look through.
So you wrote, your chapter is chapter 9 in the book. I just seen very briefly, I haven't read it. How many chapters are altogether? So that will give me how many different nationalities or people that are South Asian that are contributed.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's take a look. Got the book here.
Yeah.
Brought the book with me.
Yes, it's a beautiful book.
So it's quite
it's a heavy book.
It's actually broken into 3 different categories.
I see.
So there's 19 chapters in total.
Okay.
The first section is about migration and the actual moving of people around the world, from India throughout the rest of the world, finally getting to British Columbia. Mm-hmm. Identity is the section about belonging and finding our own. That's where my chapter is on, about identity and self-identifying. And the last one is about policy and legacy. So there's different sections with the 19 different chapters, and they talk about many different things.
Very wonderful, yeah. So is this book selling now?
The book actually is not up for sale just yet, but you can download a free copy, a PDF copy if you like, online. If you search South Asian Studies Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley, you can find the book there. But I'm not exactly sure when. The editor went on vacation, a well-deserved vacation after the book was published.
After the book was published.
So when she does come back into town, we'll have more information about when the book will be up for sale.
Oh, because like I say, that is a history that it should not be missed out. It's not our history. I think it's a history of our people.
Yes.
When we call it brown South Asian people, our people, then I think that way it also shows the settlement of them in Canada. That's one part of it. The second thing is where they come from and how was everything for them there, where they come from. Whether they are Guyanese, they are Trinidadians, or you name it.
Yeah.
There are so many different people that look alike. They sometimes eat alike and talk alike, but altogether, sometimes the language is lost there. Yes. Actually, with the Fijians, we must give credit to our elders that they maintain the language. Mm-hmm. But one more thing, when we talk about the language, maintaining our culture and history, we have maintained our language, our culture, our religious values, your rituals, and everything. But I find working in this community, as a Fijian community, I have been in here doing a lot of work in here too. The next generation here will be losing all that because either parents, I'm a grandparents, or my children, not interested to teach their children that whatever we have told them. So eventually, another generation, there will be nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we as Indo-Fijians are lucky because our culture is only about 143 years old.
Yes.
So it's fairly young. Excuse me. A lot of people call Fiji Little India for that very reason because we have retained a lot of the culture and language and history. Whereas if you take, for example, some of the other diasporas in the world, the Indian diasporas in the world, they've been around in those countries for far, far longer than we have, and they've done a very good job of mixing into the culture of those countries. Whereas we in Fiji have not done that, and I am afraid that in Canada eventually we will lose that identity. But the way for us to retain it is to first identify our culture and be able to identify what it is that makes us unique or what unique aspects of our culture belong to us. If we can identify that, like our language or our food or some of our rites and rituals that we do, then we can do a better job of retaining those things with a little bit more pride and knowing that this is special, it's special to us because of these reasons, because our ancestors, our Girmitia ancestors were resilient enough to keep these things intact so they could pass it on to us. And the fact that we're here today as Indo-Fijians in Canada is something that's a testament to our Girmitia ancestors and their resiliency to pass these things on. So we should take it as our duty to not forget that and to pass those lessons on to our future generations and make sure they don't forget the lessons that were taught to our ancestors.
You have pointed a very important point and talked about the Girmitia. Not very long ago, it was a Girmitia Day, which was May 14th.
Yeah.
And I have seen you at that event one time. It was a small gathering, and you talk about the history. Do you think there are enough people in here, or even not has to be young, the youth, like my age or younger than us, do we care about what Girmit Day means to our people, to our history?
We should. It's important for us to remember. Now, one of the things that I personally think, and I see this all, and the Fijian government did this as well actually, is they had a Girmit Day celebration.
Yes.
And I for one take not offense, but I just kind of I'm not very comfortable with celebrating Girmit because there's nothing.
It's not a celebration.
There's not a celebration.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people say it like that because it's so easy to say Girmit instead of any other word because it's our word. It's exclusively the word Girmit is an Indo-Fijian word that when you say it, you know you're talking about indentured laborers in Fiji. So people think that if you can use the word, we can use the word however we like.
Yeah.
But in reality, Girmit was something that broke us.
Yes.
Girmit was something that changed the people from who they were to who we are now.
Yeah.
But the change wasn't made by Girmit itself. It was the people, it was the Girmitias that made the changes.
The Girmitias are, we call the people.
Yes.
During that time. They were bought from India to work on indigenous system or on plantation.
Yes.
So I think this history, if we don't keep repeating ourselves, and you are very right, agree with you, it's not to be celebrated.
No.
There's nothing to be celebrated. Think about November 11th, right?
Remembrance Day.
Remembrance Day, First World War, Second World War, every World War after that. We are not celebrating, we are observing that day.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Girmitia Day or Girmit Day, whatever we want to call it, has to be observed to pay tribute to our forefathers and the people, the first settlers of Fiji who came and dug and make Fiji what Fiji is today.
That's right. There was a post on social media I had heard once regarding May 14th and how it's observed as as Girmit Day, and it's also the day that the first coup
The
happened
coup
in 1987. And this lady had put a post up and said that you can't compare the two
No.
because ek banai la chiche and ek bigade la chiche, meaning one thing is to create and the other is to destroy.
Destroy, yes.
But in reality, they both destroyed.
Both are destroyed.
They both destroyed.
Yeah.
And that's a day that we can observe. We can observe both events because they were both somber events. We
Yeah.
lost people's lives. People's lives were changed, and they were affected us
Yes.
specifically. So I do believe that May 14th is a better day to observe in solemn remembrance than it is as a celebration. Now, of course, with that being said, there is a day that I think that is a celebratory day that we do and we should celebrate. January 1st. January 1st, 1920 was the day of our emancipation, and every single Girmit was cancelled. If I say if there's any day to celebrate, that would be the day that we should celebrate.
So it's January what? 21st?
January 1st.
Or January 1st?
Yeah.
So that's when that agreement between the people that they bought, the agreement was broken on that day.
That day.
That people were free
That day.
to either to choose to live in Fiji, or if they want to go back, they can go back.
Yes,
then.
that's
There
right.
was no agreement. There was no nothing. You were free to
Yep.
do.
Yeah, that was the day.
And that day, very hardly even people remember.
Yeah.
People don't know enough about that day.
Just imagine what January 1st, 1920 must have been like. What
Yeah.
kind of celebrations there must have been for the people
Yes,
that were cool.
that is a celebration.
That is a celebration. That must have been a great party
Yes,
to be at. And that's a day that we should celebrate as our Emancipation Day.
yes. Important days coming up for next year
Yeah.
for us to think about and ahead and start planning from now.
Yes, definitely.
So, what can you say about your chapter in the book?
Well, my chapter is two-thirds of the chapter talks about our heritage and our history, how of our people, how our ancestors traveled from India to Fiji, the circumstances around that. Talk about the actual sailing, the voyage, the circumstances of when our ancestors actually landed in Fiji, what it was like meeting with the indigenous Fijians for the very first time, what the colonial government did and how they treated us is also I mention in there and talk about that. But more importantly, what I focus on is our ancestors, the Girmitia ancestors, and how they were the ones that overcame Girmit to create the culture that we have today. That's the first two-thirds of the chapter. The last third of the chapter, I talk about my own personal experiences as an Indo-Fijian and as an Indo-Fijian Muslim in Canada. So I grew up in a small coal mining town called Sparwood, British Columbia, in southwestern BC. And I was the only, my family was the only Indo-Fijian Muslim family in town. But there was a good deal of Indo-Fijian people.
Which year are you talking about?
My father moved to, my father emigrated here in 1973.
Oh, okay.
And we were there throughout the 70s and 80s
Okay.
in Sparwood. And there was a large population.
Yes.
Actually, as a matter of fact, compared to the population in that area, percentage-wise, there is a large percentage of Fijians in the Elk Valley, in that region. So I talk about my experience growing up in a predominantly European town, and how my parents did their best, much like our ancestors, in making sure I retained my own heritage, culture, language, and religion. And then I talk about, I discuss how in 1993, as a 15-year-old, I moved from Sparwood to Surrey, and then I had the opportunity to meet my family and to see my culture in full bloom, and to see it was the first time I went to masjids.
Mosque,
It was
yeah.
the first time I did Eid prayers. It was the first time I went to weddings and all these things that I had never done before. And it amazed me because I'd never seen and done any of this before when I was growing up. And I think that's one of the reasons I became an archaeologist in the first place, was because I had the opportunity to sit back and observe my culture and see what it was and we were doing. And I had to always ask that question, why? Like, why were we doing things the way we were doing as opposed to the other South Asian people that were here, or the way that the European people were doing where I was growing up? So that curiosity of why fueled me to become an archaeologist. But of course, as a 20-year-old, I was so naive that I thought, there isn't anything to study in Indo-Fijian culture, so what am I going to do? There's nothing to study, so I'll just study Indigenous First Nations people in Canada. And that's what I did for about 20 years. That's what I studied until my father was ill. And my father passed away just about almost 2 years ago now. And while he was at the hospital, I had an opportunity to talk to him about what I do as an archaeologist. As I'm telling him that I study First Nations culture and First Nations people, I came to realize that I should be studying my own culture and my own people, and it's something that I should do. And like you had said before, it's very difficult to retain our culture. And one of the problems that I had was I found it very difficult to relate to my culture, and I found it very difficult to say that I'm Indo-Fijian, I'm doing this for myself. But I could do it for my dad. My dad was born and raised in Tavwa, in the Fiji Islands, and that was his culture. But if it's my dad's culture, then it has to be mine too,
culture.
right? So,
and it's going to be your children's culture. That's how it's passed on for generations.
So I took it upon myself in the chapter here to explain like my feelings of coming full circle from somebody who had no exposure as an Indo-Fijian to now writing a chapter in a book to make sure that our culture is preserved and for other generations. I think one of the proudest things about having this chapter here is that one day when my kids are older, they can read it. My 15-year-old, I sent it to him so they can read it. My grandkids can read it. Everyone can read it. As a matter of fact, the book will be part of a couple of class curriculums in Kwantlen University as well. So hopefully a lot of eyes will have the opportunity to look at the book and read my chapter and get some insight about our heritage and culture.
That's wonderful. And as far as I remember, you're the first person, because I have been part of this media for a while, and I keep my eyes and ears open all the time to see where is academia about the history and Fijians. I'm a diehard Fijian, as you are, your dad were, and your dad was. So we cannot forget our history.
Right.
Because if you don't know who we are, you don't have your own identity, then जैसे बोले नहीं कि पेंदी के लोटा, you just don't fit anywhere.
Yeah.
So we have a foundation. We have to maintain the foundation.
Yeah.
We need to acknowledge the foundation. We have to share the foundation with our younger generation and all that. Only then you are who you are.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter how many generations I live in Canada. I am a proud Canadian because this land has allowed me to grow, and sky's the limit in this country.
Yep.
At the same time, I'm not going to be able to change my color and become a white. No. I will always going to be a brown. My family is going to be brown. They're never going to. So if you are that, why not maintain who you are? Why are you running away from your identity? People that lost identity, they don't belong anywhere. They are just kind of lost in the ocean, kind of.
Yeah, a lot of people come to me and say things along the same lines, where we're not Fijian enough to be considered Fijian, and we're not Indian enough to be considered from India. And of course, if we walk into a room in Canada, you can tell that we're not the same Canadians like everybody else. And we feel kind of lost, and we feel like we don't have a place in this world. But we do. We do. Maybe not having a place is the place that we belong at this point in time. But identifying our culture, identifying the fact that we don't belong anywhere, will find us the people that we belong with. And that's one of the best things about this whole journey that I've started is finding people, like-minded people of our community that want to help perpetuate our culture, get the knowledge out there for our future generations, and to make sure that it doesn't get lost. And it's so important for not just for our future generations, but for our past as well.
What's next for you?
I don't quite know yet. I think I've been in talks with the New Zealand Girmit Association. The Fiji Girmit Association of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think I would like to start here in Canada.
Yes.
Is a Canadian Girmit. Well, if I do it, I will call it the Canadian Girmitia Association, because I want it to be about our ancestors, not about Girmit.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is to make sure that people keep knowledge of our history, and make sure we never forget the sacrifices that our ancestors made.
Yeah.
Like you had said, that May 14th is one of the days that it should be observed. It's a Remembrance Day. You know, like we should have
Yes.
a moment of silence
Of course,
for
of course.
all the people that we've lost, and it's important that people know why we do that. A lot of the other countries, Australia and New Zealand, they're so far forward from us in these regards because there's so much closer ties with Fiji.
Yeah, very
But,
closer.
yeah, and it's so much easier for them to have this tie. But they had said a long time ago, and this association in New Zealand is about 10 years old now.
Yeah.
And they said a long time ago that they were not going to mourn, they were not going to cry, they were not going to be sad about what happened. But you can't forget it though.
Yeah,
You still have to acknowledge it. You
Yes,
still have
yeah.
to know that these people went through a lot of hardship for us to be where
Yes.
we are. So hopefully we'll have another Girmit association here, and we'll
Okay.
do events, and January 1st is another one of the Emancipation Day that we should have a celebration too.
I have thought about it myself,
Yeah.
you know, and I said it's very easy for us to forget that day.
Yeah.
So a younger generation, because I'm not so much about educating us. We have a choice to pick up the book, go to the library, do reading and all that. But for the younger generation, I would like to keep that alive. So where our parents or grandparents and people, our generation has come from. So that is a very good, we should not lose the focus and we can talk about it. But thank you so much for coming in and talking the insight about the book, about where you started, and you are not stopping anywhere anytime soon. And we shall continue where we left off today and then move on to talk about Girmitin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
So with that, I think we're running out of time. But if you like to be on that seat and talk about your passion or what you have done or what you like to do, you are most welcome on Kamilla Singh Show. Thank you for watching Kamilla Singh Show. And thank you. Bye for now.